Well, welcome back to buddy. If you're just finding this might actually work out better. For those of you that don't know, we were just live, and
Part
then
two.
with the changing of people having to leave or whatnot, we accidentally hit end record instead of leave broadcast. But either way, now we can have maybe a more standalone coaching search between obviously Boatman and I. This is more up our wheelhouse, anyways, and like terms of obviously what we said, what gets us excited. So. Just a quick recap, because I think I am going to post this as honestly its own separate little snippet. We kind of went through the Vandal retreads. Do you want to just kind of get people up to date on kind of exactly what you talked about in the last episode before we cut off on like Casey Dunn, Lindgren, Nussmeier, and Linehan, and try to keep it short because then we'll start just bouncing around names.
Yeah, there's about 4 names that have played here at the University of Idaho that would draw up certain levels of excitement between the fan base, whether it's bringing donors back, bringing fans back. But those are 4 names: Lindgren, Dunn, Joel Thomas, and Scott Linehan that people are pretty familiar with that were former Vandals. Each would bring a different level of excitement within this show and with our fan base. I said I'd be happy with any 4 of them for all different reasons. Whether it's bringing excitement back, right? Like some people will be questioning Scott Linehan, but man, I know a lot of boosters would be pretty happy. It's a name that people might get excited about to come back to KBO and watch games with, just on face value, face level, right? And it's someone I think would maybe not like leave for another job.
Yeah, well, because he's been there and done that. That's the one thing I lean more on the Hammer side of this as well. Like. Obviously, I think Scott Linehan would be a big win. For us, fortunately or unfortunately, I think he's in a position that it absolutely makes sense for him to take the job if he wanted it. He's an offensive analyst in Missouri. He's had years. He's had the Rams.
Probably still getting paid by the Cowboys. I don't know.
Yeah, like I think he is at that point where like it's his Bobby Houck job. Like if we got Scott Linehan, I don't think he's going anywhere without being fired or retired. Like. I don't think this would be a stepping stone for him. I think at this point he'd be coming back. He's from the Central Washington area. Like this is a guy that we could ride out into the sunset with, and hopefully he keeps winning. And I think that's the pro with him. The con, I agree, is he really hasn't had success as a head coach. And the college level is different. And he's just gotten back into the college game for the first time and then was immediately fired. But we talked about it. LSU was a mess at that point anyways.
And Coach O was trying to save his job. So it's, you know what I mean?
But then the excitement too of like, if Scott comes in, Matt Linehan's probably coming in and run your quarterbacks, your running backs, probably not your OC, but who knows? So it brings Matt Linehan back to Idaho, which I think a lot of people will be down for. So I think there is the wins with that. It would be cool if we could get a certain Garrett Nussmeier to maybe transfer.
Something I forgot to mention was Doug Nussmeier.
Yeah.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, I was going to say, so what is your opinion on Doug Nussmeier, current quarterback's coach for the Dallas Cowboys, Vandal legend as well.
The Cowboys.
And his son, I'm thinking, this is Ed McCaffrey 2.0. Could we get Doug Nussmeier to leave the Cowboys and just former 4-star recruit Garrett Nussmeier transfer?
Where's his son at? I don't even know.
He's at LSU. He's a true freshman. They played him in 3 games. They specifically quit playing him so they could redshirt him for next year. So he obviously is getting looks, and I don't know if you get looks at LSU, you're going to leave. Where Dylan McCaffrey was kind of getting shafted at Michigan, which is probably why he was more open to leaving. Plus, McCaffrey was a senior. Garrett would be committing to his 4 years at the U of I. So obviously, it's not happening. It was just more something fun to throw out. But Nuss,
I think Nuss is actually more likely to leave. Like he's job hopped quite a bit. The college ranks. I mean. He was at Fresno State. He was at Washington.
Yeah, he has
his Michigan. He was at Florida.
His coaching resume is Michigan State offensive coordinator for all these next ones I'm going to read. Fresno State, Washington, Alabama, Michigan, Florida, and obviously now he's at the Dallas Cowboys. So and those are some high profile jobs,
right?
And I think that's his issue.
I would love to have Nuss. I think Linehan's way more likely to come to Idaho. And like, even though some people always say, well, he hasn't had success head coaching. Actually, sometimes like that is good. Mm-hmm. Like, not to say like, oh, you want a guy
Troy Taylor didn't, and he just won the Big Sky.
Right. Like
Jeff Choate didn't.
Troy Taylor only had a high school level
Aaron
head
Best
coaching.
didn't.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and people will say, well, Scott Linehan wasn't successful as a head coach. Okay. NFL, it's a completely different ball game. Like, it's massively different. You know, people go, well, he wasn't good at calling the plays for the Cowboys, blah, 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 blah. Right. Okay. Probably not calling the plays if he comes to Idaho. I mean, if anything, he's probably learned great organizational skills, which is, I think, something that Idaho we've been crying out for, is that we would just love someone else to be OC. We'd love someone else to like call plays. We would love to, just to, because it takes off, like having your head coach call plays from the sideline. It works for some people, generally doesn't work out for most. Not everyone's Sean Payton. Okay. Just like that's not normal. Mike McCarthy used to call his own plays in Green Bay, to reference NFL. He's given that up to Kellen Moore, who calls plays, right? Like, it's sometimes it works out for the best. So I mean, if Scott brought in an OC and brought in someone else to call plays, and he was the guy who oversaw everything, knew how to organize right, get out there, recruit, make fans happy, I think he's the perfect guy for the job. This is just me just guessing. Like, I have no idea. I would love it. We're just going through former head guys. This isn't even people who we think are necessarily going to get the job, right?
Yeah. But you got to call and you got to interview.
Yeah, these are the
at least
give a call list. These are the, hey, give a call list, right? Like, that's what this list is. Make them say no,
and then make your decision.
Right. But, so I guess I would go Scott over Nuss. That was the original question, and that's my answer on that.
Lindgren versus Casey Dunn, because now you're getting kind of the younger OCs in here. You think Lindgren?
Yeah.
In likeliness, or if they both said yes?
I think both. Okay. Lindgren's coaching the Big Sky in the last 15 years at AU. Okay, so he knows that whole ball game. He spent his whole time on the West Coast, right? Casey Dunn's been in Oklahoma State for a long time, so sometimes success is brought upon being at a certain spot and having continuity for a while. Lindgren's shown success at NAU. He's shown success at Colorado. He's now showing success at Oregon State. So he knows how to move around. And his current head guy at Oregon State, Jonathan Smith, Idaho's quarterback coach for 5 years. So I would take Brian Lindgren over Casey Dunn.
Okay. I'd be happy with either.
Yeah.
But I think, Lindgren has shown at a tougher place. Not that Oklahoma State's easy to win at either. But yeah, I think
Oklahoma State's – you could probably argue that Oklahoma State's a top 25 FBS program year in and year out. So that's not a bad place to be.
But that has always been under Gundy or Les Miles. They have had incredible coaching stability there.
And a lot of money with a man named T. Boone Pickens.
Where Oregon State has been in the cellar of the Pac-12 for a while. So that turnaround is more impressive.
Yeah.
And
Colorado is also really good when he was there. I'm not saying that's his part, but like Colorado was winning Pac-12 South titles, and Colorado's been terrible for 30 years.
So let's get into the controversial picks. Controversy breeds, views. Nick Rolovich. I know Brian and Dallas are kind of on the same boat here with me. I don't think I've heard your take on it. I'm big into, if you could get him, you get him, because eventually, the thing that led to his firing was not his ability to coach at Washington State. It was
or his mishandling of player scandal.
Yeah, it was something that was out of even the university's control. It was by the governor of the state, made it to where he could no longer be employed by the institution. That is not an issue at Idaho currently. Nick Rolovich, also difficult places to win: Pullman, Washington, and Hawaii.
Honolulu.
He's won at both. And I know people, like in my article, which hopefully we'll have freaking edited because they had a lot of errors, was 28 and 27 at Hawaii. But he took over for Norm Chow, who was 10 and 36 in 4 seasons. So, he turned that around. I know 500 is not impressive, but he was able to do that. He's been a head coach for 6 years, and 4 of those seasons he's been over 500. And I think you can see that it's not really fair. He got fired from Wazoo, and Wazoo has done well with basically his system in place. Now, maybe he doesn't win all those games, but his Wazoo record at 5-6 probably would look a lot better now had he been able to be maintained. So I don't know. I am okay with the Rolovich idea. I don't think it would be a job he would take. I know he is weird enough that he might think the Kibbe Dome is cool. I know he's attended multiple games in the Kibbe Dome. But the problem is, I think he is more on the Art Briles, Hugh Freeze train, where though there's some controversy around him being fired, he's not going to be stuck to the kind of schools those guys were. Because because there's going to be
different
I think
scandals too. Like
he could
way
coach in
different
46 different states, I think it is. He just happened to be one of the 4 states where he wasn't allowed to coach.
Like way different scandals too. Compared
way
to
worse
Browse
scandals.
and
100%
like
worse
this
scandals.
is like those guys are. That's a
if
way
those
different
guys
thing.
have jobs, Rolovich is going to get a job.
And Liberty, like that's it honestly cracks me up that Liberty has Hugh Freeze their head coach because it's supposed to be a religious institution, and this is who they hire. The person who's giving players hookers. Anyway, fun thing today. Fun fact of the day: Jimmy Lake and Nick Rolovich never coached in an Apple Cup.
Well, one would argue that Jimmy Lake only got his job because of comments while coaching in an Apple Cup. But yes,
one would argue that Jimmy Lake. One would argue Jimmy Lake was a head coach because he owned Mike Leach for 7 years.
And made one smart ass comment about it, and then that's how he got his job.
Well, also, anyway, I get into Jimmy Lake because
let's not talk about the Huskies.
But I could talk about the Huskies again. That's one of my 3 coaching searches, Chris.
You and I won the Big Sky because they beat Sac State. Washington is last place in the Big Sky. They didn't win a single game. They're tied with Southern Utah
and UNLV. I mean, I could get in. That's one of my 3 coaching searches, so I did have to bring that up. Obviously, Manchester United being my 3rd one, and thank God. Anyway,
so do you like? I mean, would you be okay with
Nick Rolovich? Yeah, I'd be okay with it. I think so. Like,
where would he fall in your short list? Is he a top 5, top 10, top 20?
Safe top 10, pushing top 5, around that. Like he'd be around that top 5. Like I would definitely. Yeah, I mean, someone said he's a tad radioactive for this administration. I'm not sure if he is. Scott Green has a lot of credibility right now. Like, dude, the state board loves him. The governor loves him. Every person who's associated with the University of Idaho loves Scott Green. Like, not the saying the dude can get away with murder, but like, shit, he's not Chuck David making this hire. And I will
if Scott Green makes this hire, people will get on board.
And I'm just saying this, like, this is something that just Vandal fans should remember moving forward. Terry Gollick is probably not making this hire. Terry Gollick is not making this hire. This is a Scott Green hire. Just from like what I've heard / my personal, not even heard, but like just more like what I think. This is something that's like so important, right? This is the most important person, top 3 most important people in your university publicly. Your president, football coach is one of them because that's who's in the news, right? Like Scott Green's not doing a weekly radio show in Boise every week. Okay. The football coach is. So he's going to have his hands all over this hire in the final say. Terry will be involved. I'm not saying she's not going to be involved. She's going to be involved, but final say is going to come down to see Scott Green. And so when I say he could get away with murder with this hire, he could. Rolovich could definitely be the next head coach at Idaho if he wanted it. And I think everything would be fine.
I just don't think Rolovich wants it. All right.
Neither do I.
On to the next bit of controversy.
Okay, let's do it.
Any former donkeys?
I mean, okay, define donkey. Like
anyone with attachments. Because I know obviously my pick here is I like Byron Hout. I am starting to now that this is realistic, I will say not quite the experience I want yet. I can also
hasn't called plays yet.
A bad look that he is probably in the hunt for a job because I don't think Idaho State's most of their staff will be retained by the new administration.
Right.
So he is most likely a free agent coach. What I love for us maybe to bring it made me more realize he would just be a good fit to bring in. I hope the new guy maybe looks at him and goes, okay, Montana State, Boise State.
Problem is he's a D-line coach, and I would much rather retain Luther. Okay.
True.
Like that's, I mean, like if I had to choose between Luther and Byron Howe as my next D-line coach, I'm choosing Luther Ellis like 11 days out of 10.
True. Probably the most likely guy to stay on the staff.
I think that's something we should address too.
And we hire former Vandals like Nuss or Lindgren. I would expect, or Linehan. Brian Reeder probably finds a way to stay on the staff just out of that respect thing. He probably gets demoted from OC because they'll probably want to bring in their own guy. He
can go back to a recruiting job. He can go. I mean, he'll be back to receiver or running back coach. I guess I'll name my 3 most likely people to stay part of the staff: Luther Ellis, Brian Reeder and JD Johnson, the director of football operations. Like that's someone who I definitely hope gets retained as JD, because the director of football ops is the person who makes the program tick every single day, so the head coach doesn't have to. It's their person who runs the program, like kind of keeping everything going along. And especially since we're having a quick turnaround, like you want a couple people with ties to the school, right? A couple people who have been moving things along. You don't want to get rid of everyone. So those are my three that I would hope would be involved in the next staff at some level. But Donkeys, okay, Byron Hout, no for me, because hasn't called plays yet at this level. Like if you were to come to me within 5 years and he's been a DC at Idaho State or somewhere else, and he's been successful, great. I would consider it, but can't even consider, like there's too many other names out there that are interested in this job that would just get the nod over him, right? Like, who else is a donkey that you could say?
There's not really. I mean, maybe.
Okay, actually, one for me, Zach Hill.
Okay.
Name not too familiar with maybe a lot of people. Zach Hill was the OC at Boise State only, or passing coordinator for a year, I want to say.
Yeah. Now he's at what? Arizona
so very
State?
brief. Before that, he's the OC at Arizona State now. He was at Boise for a year or two. Before that, he was the OC at Eastern. He was the OC before. Was that when Best was first head coach? I want to say. So he was like Best's first OC. Okay. I would like Zach Hill. That'd be probably my only donkey that I could like think of off the top of my head. I guess Jeff Choate's in that mention too. So sure, I think those are two. And those are like people who is like they were there for like a year or two. They weren't like they weren't Byron out playing there.
Yeah.
No, there's someone who stopped there for a year on the way through.
Yep. Is Shoemaker out of it for you?
I don't know. So when you say Shoemaker, I guess we should address that's Ian Shoemaker, the former offensive coordinator at Eastern Washington. Resigned / let go amid some spooky stuff a few weeks ago. No one externally knows, and no one that people that we know they're even like semi-attached, like know Eastern, don't really know either. Like it's kind of, I think the best guess is that he just didn't there was some disconnect with Aaron Best, the head coach. Before that, I was pretty hot on Ian Shoemaker. I think it would have been a good spot because he was a head coach at Central Washington, won over 50 games for them, pretty successful. He was taking that progression of Central to Eastern. His offenses were exciting. He's had head experience, been good with it. Now, since he's let go, or I guess that kind of goes to the Rolovich thing, but like Rolovich has been a head guy in multiple different spots in FBS. So like that's a little different versus Shoemaker's only had D2. And we don't really know what the reason was that he was let go. So if the university did its due diligence, right? Like if they know, and it's just literally him and Aaron Best did not get along, right? I'm okay with Ian Shoemaker, but him being let go kind of definitely knocked him down my totem pole.
Yeah. Okay. Any ones that you've heard or seen on All Vandals or talking to people that you were like wasn't even on your radar that kind of piqued your interest? Because obviously I don't know how you heard about it. Obviously I think you know who my number one is, and that was one like that was totally off my radar that you actually provided.
That was my name. That was the name that I gave out. Okay,
that I'm in love with. So that's gonna say if that is one of those people, leave him off because that's kind of like, you know, I feel like how we'll crescendo the show, and I'll see where you're at with him. But is there anybody else that kind of got their name thrown out that you're like, okay, like hadn't heard of this guy, did my research on them, and I'd be on board.
And so this is all the speculation. I will say that like I've maybe heard some names. I'm actually not even going to talk about them right now because it's a lot of just speculation from people. Maybe people who are a little more in the know than we are here. One name that I would really be interested in. I kind of referenced him earlier. It's people we're talking about Troy Taylor, talking about Bo Baldwin, Jeff Choate. I was like, well, okay, Troy Taylor's got a lot of credit for what he's done at Sac State. There's person there who deserves, like, if Troy Taylor gets this much credit, there's the person here who gets this much credit, right? Like right below Troy Taylor for what they've done.
Yep.
And so it's Andy Thompson, the DC at Sacramento State. People people going, who the hell is that? Okay, so he's been the DC at Sac State with Troy Taylor the whole time. And if you've heard Troy Taylor do interviews, he has said, I do not touch the defense. I literally call
Hands off.
He's
It's
the
like
head, he's the
Lindgren
head
in the
guy,
offense.
right? He's the head guy. Troy Taylor's the head guy, but in terms of, it's almost like two head coaches in a way. It's like someone coaches the defense, has full overall just final say on defensive stuff. That's Andy Thompson, the DC. He's from Walla Walla, played at Montana in the late 90s, early 2000s, beat Idaho a couple times. Played and then coached at Montana for a long time. He's been the Big Sky for a while. So he's someone that, I think that'd be good enough ties to the region, good ties to the Big Sky. No direct tie to Idaho, other than the fact that he's played against Idaho. He's from Walla Walla. Yeah,
Idaho.
So I mean, I think that's a name that Vandal fans, like, if that name popped up, you'd be like, who the hell is that? I would be happy with that hire, just because, like,
sneaky, yeah.
It seems like I want someone who's going to be a CEO, right? Like, and I think that's what
he gets it from being a part of it. Like, he would say, this bred success, this is how I should run this program.
And that's why I like people like Brian Lindgren, right? Like, you learn from people. That's why I say Scott Linehan would be a good choice, because I think my biggest thing is I just don't like – Petrino's a great offensive play caller. He's a good – and he was probably a good head coach, but I think they just didn't match a lot of times, right? I think that was one of my biggest things is, like, I wish he just didn't call plays, because, like, when you have a guy who's calling plays and being the head guy, they make a lot of wrong decisions sometimes, especially on offense, because it's a lot more game management. I think Andy Thompson could hopefully learn some things. I'd be okay with him calling defense. It's a way different ballgame calling defense than it is calling offense.
So this is like and this is where I kind of want to pick your brain, because, like, maybe we were the absolute two wrong people to do this. I personally prefer a defensive head coach because, one, I think they understand the compartmentalization of an organization and a team. I think we just saw it with Paul Petrino. Offensive guys seem to have a harder time not having their fingers in all the pies. Like,
because it's decisions on hey, when do you go for it? When do you punt? Defense, you just react to everything, right? Like it's a way different thing calling defense than is calling offense. Like, offense, and, you're controlling the flow of the game.
And, like, my critique on here is offensive minds are a dime a dozen. We find them, like, Ian Shoemaker was just this great offensive mind. Like, you don't hear a lot of, like, oh, he's a really good defensive coach. But then you look at, like, some stats that I pulled up. You look at some of the best coaches of all time, current and past. Nick Saban is a defensive coach. Bill Belichick is a defensive coach. Pete Carroll, defensive coach. Bill Cowher, defensive coach. John Harbaugh, defensive coach. Mike Tomlin, defensive coach. Paul Bear Bryant is a defensive coach. Meanwhile, you want to look at the names, like, in the Big Sky, take a Big Sky centric. Bobby Houck, defensive coach. Jay Hill, defensive coach. Jeff Choate, defensive coach. Chris Ball, defensive coach. Like, the coaches who have been fired recently? Bob Stitt, offensive coach. Pflugrad, offensive coach. Ed McCaffrey not looking great, offensive coach. Paul Petrino, offensive coach. Rob Fennessy, Tim Walsh. The guys who have recently been fired in the Big Sky are all offensive coaches. Where you look at the guys who have just won the conference the last couple of years, said now Troy Taylor. But as we said, he lets Andy Thompson run the defense. This is how this whole thing came up. Yeah. It is defensive coaches. And I have said this forever when, like, with the Seahawks stuff comes up, like, we should hire somebody. I'm like, look at defensive coaches win stuff. Out of the last 12 Super Bowls, 9 have been won by defensive coaches. Out of the last 10 national championships, 6 have been won by defensive coaches. And depending on what Kirby Smart does this year, that will be 7 of 11. So, like, that is my point, is everybody loves the offensive coach. It is way easier to find a good offensive coordinator than it is a great head coach. And I think you see that most defensive coaches translate to really good head coaches. It's my point with Andy Thompson.
Yeah, I mean, like you talk about, like, you look at the FBS college football playoff right now, right? Luke Fickell, Nick Saban, Kirby Smart, defensive guys. Only Ryan Day was an offensive guy out of who's in the top 4, right? I mean, I'm just saying.
It speaks for itself. Like, offensive minds are great, and you can get them as OCs. Yes,
but they have to be able to compartmentalize better. And sometimes I think defensive guys are, because, like I said, offense is when you're calling offense and trying to manage a game simultaneously. Okay, you are most offensive guys come from quarterback coaching too, right? So like the most important position on the field. So they just go like this with them. Okay. Defensive guys, like you might have a DB, but hey, they know what's going on with the D linemen. They know what's going on with the linebackers, right?
Yeah.
Like they know what's going on. It has to work way more as a unit and a mesh versus like what the hell's a quarterback doing the whole time. And also they're not controlling the flow of the game. Offense, you are. When you run, when you pass, when you decide to punt, like it's a way different thing. Yeah, I think that's just a name that if I'm not saying this is a name at all that I have heard, but if this name did pop up
we should be excited.
Where we might have troubles here, I guess, Sac State's in the playoffs.
Yeah,
like
didn't lose a conference game. Have only lost one conference game in 2 years.
They're good, played. Undefeated conference champion Sacramento State. Chris,
look, and I'm stinging us down, and I'm pulling for Andy Thompson. So like that should say something. But I would love Andy Thompson. He is in my top 10.
He might be hesitant to maybe like take this job,
because what it would mean for his relationship with Montana.
Well, no. Because Sac State's in a playoff race now. Like, is he going to want to abandon his players? A lot of guys don't. Like, and so it could be one. I mean, that's just another thing.
Idaho kind of has to put a foot to the throat here.
Right.
They kind of have to be like, look, we're not waiting for you guys to go to Frisco. Like, we have a recruiting class coming up. Like, we need your commitment. Like,
right.
And I guess you're right. That could be him being like, I'd rather wait it out and see if I can win a Frisco. They're a seeded team this year. Mm-hmm. Like, see if we can make a run at Frisco over chasing. Because if he goes to Frisco, it won't just be Idaho calling. He might not get a job like Idaho, but like somebody will call and give him a shot at some point.
Right. So that's a name, and he's also not that old. Like, I mean, so you talk about he's in his 40s, so it's kind of about how old Petrino which is about when someone who's experienced enough, but also like young enough to where they're hungry enough. They want to make a name for themselves, get going. Right. That's maybe like one of my top choices, honestly. Like, and I have no clue if that's true. Who knows what's going to happen with other maybe defensive names? Like a name I guess we forgot to mention on former Idaho coaches that was a defensive coordinator recently, Mike Cox.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Right? Like he was a defensive coordinator at UTEP the last few years. Before that, he was with John L. for like a very long time. If you go look at Mike Cox, it was like played under Dennis Erickson and Keith Gilbertson, and then literally just like with John L. for like 15 years. So you like look at his coaching time. It was like Idaho, Utah State, Louisville, Michigan State, and then he was at Kansas State for a while. I don't know if he's interested or how Vandal fans would do that. He was let go as the DC at UTEP recently. Sometimes a lot of guys being let go from their job isn't necessarily because they're bad or they did a bad job. It's because the head coach is like trying to save their ass. It worked out for UTEP. But he's a defensive guy with ties to Idaho. Yeah. That could be a name that pops up. I'm not sure.
I got one for you.
I guess what would you think of Mike Cox? Would like that? Like, would you be?
It would be very lukewarm. Like,
okay,
that would be one where once again, like I'm gonna say, like no matter what we say on here or going forward, like I'm trusting that the athletic department, Terry, Scott, do their due diligence. They've hired an outside firm.
Yeah, the outside.
They will be confident in their decision, and their confidence in their decision is going to help me be confident in them. Now, looking at this from the outside, I would be like, yeah. But then I'm going to be like, all right, they must have said something, or he must have said something that wooed him or something, But Mike Cox would not tip the scale. He's not in my top 20, maybe even my top 25. Does have a son on the team. So, obviously, he probably has interest. I definitely think he's a guy who will have made a call. I've got one that I think is more off the most people have never heard of, or they might have known Andy Thompson. Connor Riley. Do you know who that is?
No.
So let me sell you to him. All right. 8 years of coaching experience. He's from the North Dakota State tree. But he's also coached at Sac State on the offensive line. But when he went to North Dakota State, they had only had one All-American on their offensive line. By the time he took over from 2014 to 2016, he coached 6 All-Americans for North Dakota State, which I know is hard to believe that they didn't have an All-American on their offensive line, but they did. He has since moved with Coach Kleiman to Kansas State. He is the current offensive line coach. So he's not a coordinator, which makes me think he'd be also more likely to stay hands-off on the coordinating aspect of it. While he's been there, he's also had 3 more All-American offensive linemen and running backs. And he's also put on when he was still at North Dakota State, also took a walk-on running back to the NFL. The only thing that concerns me, he is outside of the Midwest. He's only spent 2 years in the West. He's had 18 years of coaching experience, 16 of which are either in Kansas, Nebraska, Minnesota, or North Dakota. But I think we've just seen with Brett Vegan and Craig Bowl at Wyoming, that doesn't necessarily mean they can't come in the West and win. So, like, I'm thinking of like a guy who's still kind of young. He's seen North Dakota State. He's a guy who, once again, isn't really in my top 10, but like a guy that if the right due diligence was done, I think Vandal fans should kind of like would be excited about, I would hope.
I'm going to throw one back at you.
Okay.
You heard of the name Jason Eck?
No. Well, actually, I think I might have. Isn't he like a DC at
close? Okay. He is the current OC and offensive line coach at South Dakota State.
Okay. I did not know that.
Okay. He was the recipient of the 2019 FCS Subdivision Assistant Coach of the Year by the American Football Coaches Association, which is the AFCA so it's like the Bryles Award for FCS, which is the top assistant in the country. Third season as OC, sixth season the staff. He's been coaching for 22 years. If I'm looking over my left ear, because that's where my computer's at, so I'm not trying to like break eye contact here. But he did play at Wisconsin before that. Graduated in 99, so played under Barry Alvarez. And also, he coached at Idaho in 04 to 06.
Okay. I've got a little 04 to 06 guy later, but
so
I could do that.
That's Nick Holt, Dennis Erickson era. Okay. Yeah. So that's a name that I would be extremely happy with, that not too many people have ever heard. And like we say, I would like the line coach aspect. Someone who knows how to guide a unit already, like someone who's a quarterback coach, or running back coach is a hell of a lot different than coaching the O-line. Like that's a unit that you have to like oversee all the time. And
once again, Aaron
Best.
God, I can't believe I can't think of his name right now. North Dakota State's current head coach is their offensive line coach.
Oh, yeah.
How can we know the reigning? Whatever. But you get it. Offensive line coaches.
Reigning what, Chris? What are they the reigning champions of the Missouri Valley Conference?
Yeah.
No. Okay. But yeah, Jason Eck coached at Idaho. Like that's like, but only for that was his first job. After he stopped playing, he was a GA too under Barry Alvarez.
Okay. Well, so I like it. We got a comment from Will View who's talking about Mike Brennan. So I see that, Will, and I've got an idea that we can pivot to that. But I've got an assistant just to play off of yours. What if I told you there's another man that was on an Idaho staff during Nick Holt? Well, I guess actually the end of Tom Cable. What about Ed Lamb? Because I think we'll get into something a little bit later that contradicts this. But for those of you who don't know, Ed Lamb, current assistant head coach and special teams coordinator for BYU. More known for his time as the guy who got Southern Utah to win the Big Sky and then also made them relevant before just deciding to leave. And due to a news article that he was a part of when he left, he just said he wanted, kind of like Jeff Choate. It had been like 6 years. He had seen them through the Big West, into the Great West, into the Big Sky, had won both of those conferences. So really turned a program that we joke has had very little success since. Ed Lamb went 24-24 with his time at Southern Utah. But to put it in perspective, they're 5-24 without him. And he had one season where they only won 3 games. Otherwise, they're pretty successful. Put it in perspective, Warren went 16-18 with his players, and since his players are transferred out, it has been a bigger struggle for them. He's from the Jim Harbaugh tree, San Diego, but he spent time, his first real job was Tom Cable promoted him in 2002 to Idaho's defensive coordinator. So he's actually already been Idaho's DC. Obviously, Cable got fired. He was 28 at the time. That's more on Cable than I'm going to put it on Ed Lamb. They made a 28-year-old try to be a coordinator of a big program. That was probably going to have to be a failure. But, I think he hasn't gotten any movement from the BYU thing. Nobody's come calling for him to get the next job. Idaho's not Southern Utah. He would get the resources. He's coached there before. I think Ed Lamb would be an interesting hire for Idaho. I know a lot of people go, well, He's BYU. Da da da. We have confirmation from our Weaver guys. He's not Mormon, so if that's something that you're like super against
A
hiring
quarter
a
of our
Mormon
state
coach,
is so like.
but yeah, it would
I mean,
still it would help
if
us
you're trying
recruit Eastern Idaho.
in Southern Idaho, like
Yeah.
I mean,
Look at
shoot.
Rigby right now; it's the best team in the freaking state, basically. And well, it'd be nice to get some of their kids. So
Yeah, I mean if that's a prerequisite for not being coached. I mean, this is Idaho,
that's a
right?
dumb one.
we have the second highest percentage of
LDS.
Mormons in the LDS in the country. So like, use it to your advantage. Let's go get some guys who are good at football.
BYU wins for a reason.
Also, like, why do you think Weber's so good? You know, I mean, it's Utah State, they're 8-2. Did they lose last night? Anyway, those guys are also sometimes doing missions, so they come back at the right page of 20 as a freshman.
Right. So, all right. So this is Will Views. He said, let's get Brent Brennan, which maybe I'm missing something here, Will. I believe he's referring to current San Jose State coach, Brent Brennan. And I don't believe he's been let go. I don't know why he would. He just won the Mountain West. Yeah. So trust me, I would love if we got Brent Brennan. Like out of everybody we listed, yes, 100% we go and we hire Brent Brennan for sure. I don't think he's available. But what about Derek Odom, his current assistant head coach and defensive coordinator?
This is a name that you've said to me a few times. I've done a little digging on him. You know, I know it's someone that you kind of are hot on.
I am hot on him, yes.
I don't know if I'm as hot on him as you are. Like, we could do a lot worse. Like, a lot worse. I would probably end up being okay with it. I mean, you know, he's been around the block for a while, right? A long time. Yeah, you know, he's been a lot of places. Just pulling up his. He played it. You know, he's played at Utah. Actually, I think he played with Luther at Utah. So about that time, early 90s would be about Luther. I mean, so coach at Montana, Utah State, Houston, Utah again, SMU before he was at Oregon State. When he was at Oregon State, he was the DB's coach there, while Brennan was the receivers coach. So Northwest G5, I'd be okay with that. I don't know. It's just like
against Idaho.
in a weird way. Like, I mean, he's never been a head guy, right? Which is fine. But like, I think I'd rather have like Andy Thompson for some reason, maybe because he's been in the Big Sky longer, kind of thing, you know. So like, I'd be okay with it. I'd actually be okay with a coordinator who's been in the Big Sky longer because they know how to recruit at this level and deal with the resources at this level that we just don't have. Even at San Jose State, like, their football budget's a lot bigger than ours. Yeah. Since we've changed, which is a shame.
Yeah. So I guess I kind of want to, because I think our goal is to keep this under an hour. So we're coming up on kind of like, got to get to our legit conversations.
Everyone loves content.
It's
this
true.
Is the time for content.
Kent Bear is a name I've seen some people throw around, current DC for Montana. So my question with this is, I don't think Kent Bear is the right answer. Because in my opinion, I'd like us to see hire with a little bit of youth. Bear is like 71. Yeah, I think he'd be a successful coach and could maybe put that building block in place. I would rather we move with not a youth movement, but like not somebody that is like literally this would probably be their last job and they would retire. You know, unless
it's someone like Scott Linehan.
Yeah, but even that, Scott Linehan's got like 20 years on.
He's 58.
Kent Bear, yeah.
You say like being last job retire, and like unless it's like a
I'm saying situation. Like Kent Bear would probably be able to give us 5 seasons max before he's just retired. So that's why I'm against that one. Kirby Moore, that's a frisky one I've heard some people throw out.
What's he doing?
He's like the wide receiver coach at Fresno.
Oh, interesting. Well, Kalen DeBoer, the current head coach at Fresno, his name is being thrown around for some Power 5 jobs this offseason. So
depending on if he gets brought up or retained, like he might view an option. Prosser kid.
As you will, like Kalen DeBoer. So like things like that matter. You know, he's like Kalen DeBoer is probably on the move from Fresno State. See his name at Washington. TCU's open. Wazoo, seen his name attached to Wazoo too. So that's in terms of, that's a head guy, right? So then you see, what do assistants do? Does he move up and go with him as a receiver coach? Does he move up as a coordinator, right? Like, so again, just like, you know, not spitballing, but that's just like things to look at.
Yeah. What do you think? All right. I think we just need to cover Luther because people are a lot of Vandal fans like Luther. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we have this confirmed, but we've been basically told he is not really interested in being a head coach.
Correct.
He doesn't really like the daily minutia of like running the program. He just likes coaching.
Yeah, I would love
less
Luther
of when you're head coach.
I would love. I mean, well,
Luther should be retained by whoever
he
keeps
loves.
the staff,
he loves coaching and being directly involved with the D line. That's what he loves. Saying recruiting that Salt Lake area, that Utah area, southern Idaho area. You know, he has a lot of attachments there. He was an All-Pro defensive lineman, highest paid defensive lineman at one point in the NFL. He's a great recruiter. He's someone I want to see retained as a D-line coach. I don't know if he'd want to be a DC or how he would do as that. But I don't, from what I've been told and heard, he does not want to be the head coach. But I hope and pray that he is somehow still involved with Vandal football after this season, because he is someone that we can, I just want his energy. His presence is just awesome. He has the ability, Chris, that very few guys have as a coach, to where the players love you, everything, in terms of he's a player's coach, but also just commands respect at the same time, right? Sometimes you have that was the problem with Akey, too much of a player's coach, lost some respect to guys in terms of discipline thing. No one would go against Luther if you were a player, but at the same time you love him. Because I've had Thanksgiving at his house once when he was coaching. It was, my parents were out of town, so we're playing at New Mexico State the following weekend. It's 2017. Just awesome guy. I mean, awesome family. That's a person you want to be involved with your program and your university.
And I was bigger on it. And then obviously I heard this, and then Brian Marceau actually kind of put the nail in the coffin for me. And it sounds like what Boatman said, obviously, but let's just, under circumstances, this is Terry's hire, right? That would look bad for Terry Golick if her 2 men's sports hires are from the previously fired staff. She hired Kloss after Verlin was let go, and if she hired Luther after Paul was let go, it's not a good look. And so I guess that's more another thing to keep in mind is that is.
I think his name would have been at shout for an interim if Paul was let go earlier in the year.
Yep.
I think his name would have been as the shout for an interim. But that's just that's just me speculating there on that.
Yeah.
Can I throw one name at you, Chris?
Yeah, because then we're gonna go 15 minutes in, and we can freaking.
All right, let's see.
We can start wrapping into our legit who we want to be the guys.
What if I told you there's a man out there not currently coaching? He's won a national title.
Jim Tressel. I know he didn't win a national title. Well, yeah, he did. Didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
Tressel
he did.
He's not coaching. Is it Jim Tressel?
It's not. But if I told you this man out there who's won a national title, not currently coaching.
FCS or FBS?
FBS national title.
Okay, so the big boy.
And it's actually within.
Does he eat grass?
Very good reason that he would take this job, or has been involved with this job in the past. Our good old friend Dennis Erickson. What would you say to that? What would you say to that?
I would rather we have Ed Ogeron. And let me put it this way, that does nothing for me either. Or Les Miles, the other vacant. There's apparently a lot of coaches out there that actually have won titles that have no job right now.
Yes,
Les Miles.
There's a lot.
Jim Tressel and Dennis Erickson. And because everyone's like, well, Dennis, we already talked. Dude, I already told you Kent Bear. Kent Bear is 8 years younger than Dennis Erickson.
And Dennis Erickson's a little up there. But
and I'm sorry, he burned us in 06. I don't think he deserves another shot at it.
He did.
I'm grateful for everything he did.
We thought when he came in 06, that was him never leaving again.
Yeah.
Dennis Erickson
burned us in 1 year.
Dennis Erickson is 74.
Okay, I think Kent Bear is 71.
Still lives in Montana. Or not Montana, sorry. Still lives in Coeur d'Alene because he played at Montana State. That's where Dennis Erickson played ball. But still lives in Coeur d'Alene. Still heavily involved in Vandal athletics. So I will give Dennis Erickson that, in the sense that even though he's left us multiple times, we still seem to be the university he cares the most about and has the biggest attachment to, which is kind of strange, right? He's played at Montana. He's still involved with Montana State too, but he's a Vandal fan. He comes to a lot of boosters are still friends with Dennis Erickson and spend a lot of time with him. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not saying I've heard his name, but like, wouldn't be the craziest in the world if you
It
had
would.
Dennis Erickson as a CEO of this team.
I will say it would be very dependent on exactly that, a secession plan, the coordinators he brought in. Because I will go on record. I would have rather had one more year of Paul Petrino than what I'm afraid Dennis Erickson would be. I 100%. I am Erickson out. I would rather I'd rather we hire Jared Zabransky than Dennis Erickson, if I'm being honest. And it's nothing against Dennis. I've never met him. I would love to meet him. I hope I get to meet him at a booster event. I just think, his time has come and gone. And after what he did in 06, I don't think he deserves.
All right, he's gonna bring. Here's what we're gonna do. Here's the plan, Chris. This is gonna transition us into what I'd like to see. Dennis Erickson as head coach. Okay, then I would take Tom Cable as offensive coordinator and Nick Holt as defensive coordinator.
Dude, you are just like everybody that's fearful of the Vandal retread thing. I think they just had a heart attack.
I just named the perfect scenario. I just named the perfect scenario.
I guess Erickson wasn't fired, but that would be a super old dude who has not had much success recently in his career because he's old, bringing in two former fired Vandal coaches that are both jointly considered the reason we're in the hole we are because they took over a successful Vandal program.
Nick Holt was not fired.
6 years. True, he left due to the rumors of us bringing in who? Dennis Erickson.
Yeah, Nick Holt was not fired.
He left. Might be some animosity there too.
Nick Holt left to go be Scott Linehan's defensive line coach, and then while en route to taking said job, Pete Carroll said, "Well, come be my DC."
Let's get Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll might be open
for a team that sucks. And a team that's been bad for a long time. Why does this keep happening to us? Where we have guys who are taking NFL like attached to pro jobs and all this kind of stuff. I don't know.
Yeah. And look, I'll say it like up there. Dude, Stallions. I went and watched our boy Rico, who joined us earlier, being coached by Mr. Erickson and Linehan. I'm out. Like that would not get me excited.
That'd be just beautiful.
So I want to spend like the last 10 minutes kind of covering like our legit. So like we got all right. I was gonna say we got a couple more time. I know we've heard some of the coastal guys. I don't know how I feel about like people that just don't have West Coast coaching experience taking an FCS job. Is there anybody else you've kind of heard that we can float out before we go to our like we'll give our big three? I know one we at least haven't covered, and then maybe we'll sell why each three is our three.
So I no one that I'll just kind of go with people generic things that would make me attracted to people here for this job. People who have some West Coast-ish, FCS-ish ties, like somewhat here, right? People who I love special teams coordinators. Like I've tried to go find people who are special teams coordinators. There's one, right? So there's one at James Madison. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. No West Coast ties. There's another one, maybe at Louisiana Monroe. I can't remember. But like I love special teams coordinators. That's because he's played special teams. No, I just think they make good head guys.
It's proven
because John Harbaugh. Like because they don't have the attachment to what the offense and defense are doing, right? Like they know how to manage a game and manage units. And special teams coordinators, you know what they do? You know what happens is they manage because every other position coach, Chris, during special teams helps out and coaches. So they're managing those coaches already during special teams.
God, dude, now I got.
Okay. So I do like special teams coaches. I would like to see maybe if someone had that background I would love it.
All right. So what do you think about this real quick then? I'm sorry to interrupt you because another guy I liked, but he was not going to make my top three, but you got people in that mood. Matt Powledge, safeties and special team coordinator for Baylor.
So I think I've looked that name up before too.
He's from Sam Houston State. Then he went to Southeastern Louisiana. Both two teams are in the playoffs this year. No secret there. After that, you probably know him because you actually played against him. So you tell me how their special teams units were. Started at Kentucky, then went to SELA, then Northwestern State, returned to Sam Houston State to coach the special teams. He was then picked up by ULM in 2016 to coach the tight ends and special teams. Do you remember anything? Did we play ULM in 16? I don't think we did.
Yeah, we blocked the punt.
Oh, we did. He experienced the Kibby Dome in 2017. The Vandals beat him 31-23. So he's 0-2 against Idaho. How do you remember the special teams being against UL Monroe?
We blocked a punt in 2016 versus ULM.
So not great.
So,
He then went on to ULL though for the last 2 seasons, and now obviously is running the special team for Baylor, who's
I mean, I
to have some upshiftle probably because Aranda's going to leave.
Like, so I like special teams coaches because,
and he's young. He's like still like might not be able to grow a beard young.
Right. So I think that was actually someone that I came across too. God, there's another guy named Matt. I can't remember his name. Yeah, those are like out of the box hires.
Matt Mummy?
No, those are out of the box.
I've deflated on Mummy. I'm not a Mummy guy as much anymore.
Those are out of the box hires or out of the box names, but like criteria like that, or people who have maybe are position coaches at FBS, but have maybe led a unit in the past. I want someone who's led a unit, or at least led like an O-line at some point. Because calling plays and having the ability to manage a lot of people is important to me. Like that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah. All right. So let's go down the list here. We'll both do our top 3. So we'll start at number 3. Who is your 3 on the short list? And it can be somebody we obviously previously discussed.
My 3 on the short list, within reason, or what are we talking here? Like
obviously within reason, but obviously everybody we said that's a call. Like whether it's Matt, Jeff Choate, whoever, like if it is not Nick Saban, like there's a legit shot they would consider the Idaho job.
All right. Man, this is tough for me. I'm going to say Andy Thompson's my number 3.
Okay. For me, and I know this is why I wanted this list to come out earlier. So if you guys read my article later, it's not actually in my current order, but it was already a disaster trying to get this all put together, especially after the Shoemaker news. My 3 is Ed Lamb. I think Ed Lamb would be a good hire. I think he does have that special team stuff that, Boatman talked about, currently running BYU's. He's also an assistant head coach. So he already kind of gets how to be a head coach because he's been a head coach and was successful and won the Big Sky at a program that has no business winning Big Sky. So for me, Ed Lamb is my 3. Who do you got at number 2?
See, I've never really ranked them. Like I haven't done this yet.
I know
like
this
what
is
you've
hard
been
now
doing.
that I'm going through it. I'm kind of like, yikes.
Because like I haven't been ranking them. I've just been like naming out a bunch of names and guys I'd be because like I'm just going like mass.
We should release.
Number.
We'll release.
Give me a lot.
Of, like, guys
give me a lot, and then like let's go from there, right? Like who's interested?
60 to 30 to 15 to 7 to 3 to the guy.
Andy Thompson. I'm gonna go with Brian Lindgren too.
See, now I feel like I'm cheating because, like, God, I would love Andy Thompson. I probably should have put him at 3, but I'm okay with the Ed Lamb thing too. My 2 is going to be Nick Rolovich. Like I said, that's a little bit harder because, like, I'm not sure his interest level at all. But, like, I do think we 100% have to call him. And then depending on who number 1 is, which, I mean, I don't know if he's your 1, but he's my 1. Like,
it's not even my top 3.
Ooh, well, you sold him really good to me. But I will go with Nick Rolovich too. And honestly, if it came down to him and who my number 1 is going to be, I would probably still be okay with Rolovich going over him. This is more of a 1A, 1B for me. Where like literally 3 through 10, I'm okay with any of them also getting it. So my 2 is more of a 1B. Who's your numero uno?
Scott Linehan. And here's the reason. We talk about maybe a succession plan. Boy, like how cool would it be to have Matt back on campus for a few years? And like not saying he would stick around or do whatever, right? But like that's really cool. That'd be a good option. Both are like level-headed family. Like Matt's a level-headed dude. Scott, like I said, there's no one else out there in the history of Vandal football that has this much coaching pedigree who was an alumnus here, right? Like that's it. Like he's number 1. No one who has been an alum here has that much coaching pedigree. He's available. He's at a good spot to be available, right? It's not like he's coming off from being fired from the Cowboys. He's an analyst at Missouri. He's someone that, as an analyst, we talk about Chris, right? Like that's a job. You can leave that job tomorrow, and he could start recruiting tomorrow, right?
Yep.
He's a name
Missouri's not gonna play after next weekend.
No, they're making a bowl, I think.
Are they?
They just got Dan Mullen fired last night. Saw him out on the sideline.
This happens when you're driving. I missed all this.
Scott's my number one because he could start tomorrow. He's a name that, like, when we talk about like what's been lacking, like when Dallas is saying attendance is down, someone's like donations have been down, right? Like donations would be through the roof.
It would be a lot of excitement.
A lot, like when we talk like former players, we're like, man, like that that would be awesome. Like that's a name that just gets you like, you're like, done. Let's do it. Let's go. Let's hit it. Right. That's my number one. That's who I would love to see back in Moscow. And then like when I talk about of someone who who's not going to leave, isn't going to screw us, doesn't need the money. Right. Like I just talked myself into it. It's my dream. I'd love to see Scott back here. Yeah, that's it. That's my number one.
All right. One for Alex Boatman. Is Scott Linehan. My number one is a guy that Boatman sold me on and apparently didn't even make his top three, but I'm still in, and it'll make sense after I kind of led into it with my number three. I liked Ed Lamb. I think he'd be a great hire. But if you're looking for the young Ed Lamb, and not saying Ed Lamb's old, it's Rod Chance, defensive backs coach at the University of Oregon. I just think this guy is ripe to be the next big FCS guy. He's a 4-year letter winner at Rhode Island, so he is an FCS guy. He then started his coaching career by being at Rhode Island, then to Vanderbilt, but most importantly, he was the defensive coordinator for Ed Lamb when they won the Big Sky. So he has that coordinating experience. He is still
he's led a unit. He's been in charge of guys,
and he's defense. And I told you, for me, defense is extremely important. Because I think he could come in, he could do it, and obviously, like, you're not going to get a Lindgren, but there's some guys on this list that we named who possibly could come in as the offensive coordinator, you know? So it's like, I love his option after Southern Utah. You know, he was able to move on to Oregon, then Minnesota, and now he's back at Oregon. And sometimes there's some benefits from bringing in Oregon, like Marcus Arroyo, the guy who's Arroyo out of UNLV. He moves to UNLV, and I get they have the whole new stadium and everything like that, and they lost to Eastern. So I'm not saying that was a good hire, but I'm saying like Nike gave a little bit more shits about UNLV, and they got some nice jerseys out of it. I'm not saying that's why you hire a guy, but
Andy Avalos.
Yeah, Andy Avalos. It never hurts to have a guy with the Nike Oregon connection because they seem to treat their own well. When their guys get promoted, they seem to kind of follow them with that relationship. Pending you're not freaking Taggart, like, and you leave them high and dry. Like, Oregon has a bit of following that. Nike does have an odd quasi relationship with Idaho, although very thin. I'm just thinking, like, he's young. I want us to take a chance on Rod Chance. I think he would bring a lot of energy. Not that it matters, you know, these days, but like, you know, everything that's gone on with Black Lives Matter and everything, it might be cool to be able to bring in a person of color, but that's not why he's my one. It's just the added benefit of like, I think it could help with recruiting. I think it's a good image going forward. I think he's got youth. He's got excitement. He's been a defensive coordinator. He's
in the Big Sky. He's been
in the Big Sky and won. And
a Big Sky winning defensive coordinator.
And he's an FCS guy. He's from Rhode Island. Like, I love him. I think he has all the potential. But
yeah, no, I think again, I'm the one who told you about him.
Yeah.
And hey,
people go, not on my radar.
People go, why would you leave Oregon for Idaho? Right? I think someone told me that recently. Like, LOL, like he makes probably as much money in Oregon as a DB coach as he does if he came to Moscow. Again,
get it out of here.
Guys do think like I want to get that out of people's heads so bad, Chris. Like when I named Brian Lindgren,
stupidest thing ever.
Casey Dunn, like, well, they won't do that. They make too much money. Okay, these guys already make enough money that they don't really give a shit about the money at this point. They'll make enough more money in their life, right? Like
Troy Taylor took a 46% pay cut as the offensive coordinator at a Pac-12 South winning Utah. They were on the up and up.
Turned down multiple OC jobs to make twice as much money to stay the head coach at Idaho. Because
Jeff Choate left the University of Washington to be a head man, to be in charge of a unit. Guys do it all the time. Like, if you have an opportunity, like we said, for what could be a place you can win.
Yes.
A coach can come to Idaho and win. This is not leaving leaving Oregon to go be the next head coach of Southern Utah, which he's on their list. Like, it is like people do it. A lot of these guys have become quarter. Troy Taylor is the biggest freaking example. He was young-ish. Like, it's not like he needed to make the move. He was actually successful.
How old's Rod Chance? Probably in his late 30s. Probably. Who? If I did Rod Chance, he's probably in his late 30s.
I think he's probably his mid 30s. I'll Google
mid-30s?
It super quick, but
because what year did he graduate Rhode Island? Like 11,
something like that. Yeah, he's not much older than.
So he's probably like 35. Like to be a head coach at 35, like that's something that that you just get you don't get a shot at that much, right?
He graduated in 2008.
Okay, so he's 22, 12 years ago. So he's about 35.
Yeah.
Or 13 years ago. Okay, so about 35, 36. Like to be a head coach at 35, 36. And if all else fails, like you go back and be a DB coach at a school like in Oregon again. You go be a DC at some group of 5 school, right? Like
you would fail up. Like
yes. I mean, you could fail back to where you were. Not that hard, right?
Yeah.
So again, like that's when I talked about like my criteria earlier for like what I would like to see people like a Jason Eck, people like a Rod Chance, people who have led units, but maybe have a tie that's there. Someone who knows the Big Sky, but has gone other places too and knows how to, move things around. Like that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
The name of the JMU special teams coordinator, Grant Kane. I haven't looked that up.
Grant Kane.
Was the special teams coordinator at Mercer before that too. He was also the assistant head coach at Mercer. He is also the tight ends coach at JMU as well. But no West Coast, but like when I'm looking for types of people who ST guys, people who can, oversee things, oversee other coaches, it's a good place to start. Just saying.
Yep. And I would say if you're a Vandal fan, like we said, this is probably going to happen quicker than it's supposed to. So enjoy it because like this is like kind of like a Christmas thing. Like we've given our wish list and we can't wait for the hire day to find out what gift we got. Right? Like this should be exciting.
We'll see what the hiring firm comes up with. We'll see what Scott and Terry decide to roll with here at the end of the day. Because like I said, it's going to be, they're making this decision together. It's the most, what's going to happen soon. Oh boy, I hope we get some good. I'm just excited, Chris. Like we haven't done this in a decade. Like
we haven't done it.
So
the very last time we had a coaching search, it was October 21st of 2012.
It's been almost a decade.
Yeah. So this is pretty freaking awesome. Obviously, we would have loved if it was because Paul Petrino had left us to go to greener pastures. Mm-hmm. But we're in the world we're in, and just be excited about it. Any closing points?
Yeah, I mean, this hires matters because we've been talking internally. Our schedule next year we're not screwed. Like there's a good
serious improvement. We're probably not a playoff team, but there's some
good shouts there to finish 6-5. You can push 7-4 on next year's schedule. That is possible to do.
Yep.
With the extra D1 win because we played Drake instead of a freaking D2 team. Like we could finish with 6 or 7 D1 wins next year. Like that's like not insanely crazy to think.
This is a top job opening right now. I would say, well, obviously Jacksonville State's leaving, so it doesn't matter. I was gonna say, other than Jacksonville State, that was probably the one that could push us. But like
the FCS right now,
there's not a better job open. And there's only a handful of them in the entire country when they are open.
Yeah, like it's gonna be. I hope we get someone quick and good. I don't know, how it's gonna work out. But yeah, Taylor Cash, Peel the Moat in Idaho history. Like this is big, and I'm super excited because, shit, man, I just want someone good. I just want to win again. I think that's all. I just want to win. I want to win 7 games next year. And
it's super cliche, right? To be like, oh, this hire is the most important hire we've had. It's like. Of course, we said that with Petrino because we're like, we're about to go independent, and it was.
We got a bowl game out of that, and you know what I mean. Like,
and when like the achy thing, it was like it's a super important hire because we just got left after 6 months or 9 months from Dennis Harris. Like, so I get that it's cliche to say this is the most important hire, but look, we're in a place where we were supposed to win and we're not winning. If this next coach can't win, it's no one's going to care about the hire after. Like this is like people are still like, okay, somebody can come in and turn this around. if they don't, the next hire is going to be like, oh, it's going to be like Southern Utah. It's going to be like, oh, it's just a coach. Probably going to come in, be canned in 5 years, and it's just this ever cycling.
There's a spot in the Big Sky right now. Like there's this, like there's a spot. Even though people go, oh, the Big Sky is like really deep and really good and talented, right? Like no more Eric Barrier to compete with.
Yep.
Montana State. We'll see how they transition from not having choke recruiting to having
vegan.
You know, it's gonna be
someone's gonna have to fight Montana because Montana.
Someone's have to fight Montana, but they don't have a quarterback.
Yeah.
So
Weber State can't get quarterbacks.
Weber State can't get quarterbacks. So I mean, like, there's a spot there in the Big Sky that I'm like, we can like push ourselves up into like that 7-1 tier, and like 7 wins makes the playoffs this year. 7 wins in the Big Sky makes the playoffs this year because of what Northern Iowa just did. So let's at least be Northern Iowa. At least.
Let's. All right. Well, that's it. Thank you guys for tuning into the coach special, like an hour after, with leaving a little bit of flirting for those of you that are catching it in podcast form. If you go to the Paul Petrino firing reaction video, we actually talked coach for like 25 minutes on there before we actually ended that. So there's also more talking Jeff Choate, Bo Baldwin, those guys that were more of reaches anyways in that. But with all that said, it's time for Colby Cuff to play us out with the Moscow Drinking Team song. Get excited, Vandals. Go Vandals.
Go Vandals.
So raise your glass and have a drink with me. Here's to the Vandals in the crowd, all just out there living the dream. Right up one and only Moscow drink.